Hello, friends. Welcome to the YouTube channel of Life and More. We have Mr. Anant Merathia today with us. He is a practicing commercial disputes lawyer with nearly 2 decades of experience behind him, and he has written a book titled Defaulters Paradise Lost. The book talks about Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2016. So today's session is all about this book, his life, and a little more. Welcome, Mr. Merathia.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for having me on your show. Really
Yeah,
look forward to
pleasure
it.
is all ours. Pleasure is all ours. So we'll begin with the book. Tell us about the book first, and why did you think of writing such a book? It's such a technical book, and how much? When did you decide of about writing it, and how much time? How did you go about it? How much time did you take? All the smaller things.
Okay, so interestingly, ma'am, yeah, well, the subject is technical. Let me start off with saying that we have made an effort to ensure that the book is not very technical, at least the first half of it. The second half of it, yes, you can't fully call it technical, but yeah, it specifies, it specifically caters to certain set of stakeholders who are most impacted by a particular law. Now, why I decided to write a book is I thought when this new law had come in, I was working at the ground level on this in terms of cases, seeing it day in, day out. And prior to that, I pretty much had a similar experience on my uh, corporate litigation background. I used to see companies undergoing winding up proceedings and all of that. So I somewhere felt that this law is kind of a game changer. A lot is happening under the law, significant changes are happening, which the country hadn't witnessed in the past, let's say, a couple of decades. Now, the reason of writing, I thought there is a general perception amongst people at large. They're talking about the non-legal fraternity that law is a very technical, dry, difficult subject, and any book around the
True
legal
that,
subject, we should stay away from it. We should
and
completely
that
stay
too,
away
the
from it.
one dealing with the finances. The law and
Yeah,
the finances both are very technical things and away from a common man's
understandable. Common man's, yeah.
uh,
So
purview.
that
Yeah.
very well we were aware of that. That this
Mm,
this is the general perception by which a common man looks at a legal subject.
mm,
Why I felt that we need to break this thought pattern is that you know now with the changing times, dynamic and evolving laws, while on one side you have a lot of I would say advisory available through the internet, some at some charges, some free of cost, and so on and so forth. But if there can be user friendly, easy language, simple language issues, legal issues put together for the common man. See, when I say common man, I there is a certain minimum benchmark for the common man as well. I mean, I'm not expecting someone who's working very much at the ground level, but let's say somebody who could be even a banking official or a chartered accountant, company secretary, or a businessman, an MSME owner, an MSME, I would say a manager in a decent sized company. So these are people who don't day to day interact with the law. So a law which is impacting their lives, it is impacting their entities, their companies. They should be aware of it. So it was a dual
mm,
objective. One was to ensure that an important piece of law, which has had an impact in the country, especially on the economy of the country, as you rightly said, this
mm,
is a law which has a huge financial, legal implication, financial implication.
mm,
And secondly,
mm,
to break this thinking that legal books can be only heavy. Let's make it simpler. Let's make it more reader
mm,
friendly. That was the objective. So with that, we started writing the book. I started writing the book in 2019. A couple of, rather, three
mm.
of my colleagues were working with me. At that point in time, two, and then later one more colleague joined.
Okay.
So what had happened was in 2020, like a lot of people had utilized that time for writing books or writing for writing purposes. Somehow it was
Mm,
a reverse situation for me. The year 2020 went pretty much in handling the entire sudden hit of the pandemic and how to go about it, how to ensure we suddenly moved from a conventional litigation, physical chamber to a online setup, and all of that was
mm,
taking over. That was more, I would say, that was a higher priority for us, and also
mm,
ensuring that we are all safe, our colleagues are safe, families are safe. So honestly, the book took a backseat in 2020. So
mm,
did it in 2021. 2021 we picked up again, but then again, kind of one thing or the other. There were three waves, one after the other. But partially in 21, and then from the second half of 2022, which is I would say from
Mhm.
April, May, June of 2022, is when we decided no, this has to get completed. Otherwise, this will just go on perpetually. And as a writer, you always want to keep on improvising, updating the
Mhm.
draft,
Improving,
judgments keep coming,
improving.
improving. A lot of judgments on the Supreme Court changes. So all of
Mhm.
that. So, but
Mhm.
then we gave a hard stop. We said no, we have to uh,
Mhm.
have this ready. So we had the final
Mhm.
manuscript in place by I would say end of the year 2022. It was a kind
Mhm.
of mostly
Mhm.
ready, but it was just that we were constantly doing fine tuning and all that. And then for the good
Okay.
6 months for the back and forth with the publishers on the editorial
Mhm.
aspects and all of that, which
Mhm.
is why we
Mhm.
released the book. It was ready for release actually in July, but the kind of release that we wanted concerned dignitaries. So August we had the
Mhm.
book release last year.
Mhm. Mhm. So while writing this book, how did you manage your time? Because you are a busy lawyer who's like in and out of courts, even if it is online or physical appearances. How did you demarcate some time for it? Or it happened organically, like whenever you got time, you wrote, was it structured?
It was a combination of both.
Mm,
So my when I put together the initial blueprint, I ensured I
mm,
spent some time every morning before I got onto my day-to-day routine work. So I spent
mm,
some time every morning for about I think the year 2019 was more of that until when COVID hit
mm.
us, and even later.
Okay.
But then as the book started taking shape, I would just write wherever I could. I would send myself voice notes and then later convert it into
Mm,
the text. And like conventionally, I don't know if you've heard these kind of usual stories from other authors.
mhm,
So yes, a lot of it was
mhm,
written while kind of on the move. Some of it was written even while I was sitting in a court hall and I feel something relevant is there. Yes, why don't some thoughts are coming into something. So those would get merged with the larger script of the book.
mhm.
But then yeah, it was a combination.
Okay. So now
But
we
it was
move
difficult.
to the IBC. Yeah, definitely difficult. And it's not a fiction, no? Fiction still you can write.
True. And this
Non-fiction,
is an evolving book,
hard
right?
fact books are difficult to write. But thanks for writing it. And so tell us, what was the need of this insolvency and bankruptcy code? How has it helped businesses?
So first I'll give you a broader answer, and then we can obviously discuss
Mhm.
more as we go ahead.
Hmm. Yeah.
So the genesis of why a law like this was required was there was. I'll have to go into a little bit of the economic background, ma'am, where we were in
Mhm.
2000. I would say somewhere in 2008-9, from let's say from the crisis of 2008-9 onwards, and then
Mhm.
constantly there were some challenges or the other in the financial sector, which we will discuss as we move forward.
Mhm.
But the long and short of it was three or four primary reasons. One, there was a huge mounting amount of non-performing assets for banks. Banks were having a lot of monies
Mhm.
which they have lent. They were not sure how they will recover it. That amounts were
Mhm.
crossing up to 10 lakh crores, 11 lakh crores, and things of that nature, which were huge amounts. Public sector banks, private sector banks, and it's basically that's your and mine hard-earned money, which is lent
Mhm.
out to a lot of corporates, and ultimately, banks didn't know
Mhm.
how to handle that.
Mhm.
Secondly, the recovery mechanisms prior to this law were not effectively being very, result oriented. There were certain efforts made in the 80s to bring in a particular law regarding sick industrial companies. There was something called there was a board of industrial
Mhm.
rehabilitation set up, but none of them seemed to really give results beyond the point. Initial few years they worked, but then beyond the point, there was one way or the other in India. You tend to kind of the laws come in with a certain purpose and an intent, but then the misuse
Mhm.
also starts equally fast. So
Mhm.
it was a need where you had to come in with a kind of I would say a little not little fairly strict law, where is one way
Mhm.
or the other. It was a huge thought process. It was a huge change in the process where from a debtor in regime principle where the
Mhm.
company will be in control of the promoters will be in control of the company in whichever through the thick and thin. It moved to a
Mhm.
creditor and control model where the creditors of the company would take over the company. They had to move towards that.
Okay.
So,
Mhm.
effectively, to ensure that there is one comprehensive legislation, one comprehensive law, a time bound,
Mhm.
tough law, which helps restructure companies if it is not in a position to be restructured, take some hard decisions, liquidate, close the business, bring in a concept that as ease of doing
Mhm.
business is easy, ease of exit is also an option in this country. That concept was brought in
Hmm.
for the first time through this law. That it's time to move on. You can't latch on or hold on to a company just because you have emotional value or you have some, whatever it's a background, an old company, a legacy company, because you can't do
Hmm.
it at the cost of various other creditors. So various
Hmm.
reasons, but largely these for the government to come up with something like this.
Okay. And what all sectors does it cover, the IBC code?
So it covers
Does it
pretty much
cover
all the sectors. Yeah,
businesses,
it
all
covers
the sectors?
businesses across manufacturing, trading, across
Hmm.
construction, real estate, power,
Hmm.
all pretty much all the
Hmm.
sectors. The public sector undertakings
Hmm.
have been kept at the moment away from it because they're trying to avoid, because if you
Hmm.
do start going into insolvency, then that will become a problem. But
Okay.
pretty much most of the companies, and from what the data shows, that largely companies in the construction and real estate sector
Hmm.
have been most impacted, which have been
Okay.
admitted into insolvency and all of that, followed by companies in the manufacturing sector. So these are some of the
Okay.
sectors which are most hit. Of course, then you have retail,
Okay.
wholesale trade. Those are smaller percentages, but yeah, these are the
Okay.
large hit
So does it
sectors.
Okay, so does it empower the IBC code? Does it in any way empower the home buyers like this Amrapali, the famous Amrapali case and the JP case? So, does it empower home buyers or it is only with the businessmen?
No, madam. No, no. Ma'am, it does empower home buyers. So when the law came in initially, there was a gray area. Home buyers were not given any special recognition. They were uh,
Hmm.
they were just, I would say, they were not at that point in time. Maybe the lawmakers did not see that far, that home buyers would be impacted so much. So then they were given the
Hmm.
status of a creditor by one of the amendments, and subsequently a financial creditor, which means they have a say in the decision-making process. Then they were given a seat in the
Hmm.
what you call a committee of creditors and all of that. So definitely
Hmm.
they have a say, especially when they
Hmm.
cohesively come together. They do have that, and the challenge that we see with home buyers is that getting them all on the same page, aligning their interests is the issue. But the government has time and again, and I've been seeing this very closely, the government has been making efforts
Hmm.
to come up with aspects like project-wise insolvency. You need not put the
Okay.
entire company into insolvency. So let's say one company is running 10 projects. Four may have
Hmm.
gone bust. Four may have been,
Hmm.
in a distress situation. So why do you make the other
Hmm.
six suffer? So have
Hmm.
project-wise insolvency or try to exclude certain projects out of insolvency, so on and so forth. But of course,
Hmm.
there are legislations, there are regulations for it. But definitely, the
Hmm.
home buyer today has a say. At least as a home buyer, you have some clarity that at the end of some amount of time, it could be 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, either you would get your apartment by paying some
Hmm.
additional top up amount, ma'am. Just like what you call haircuts for the bankers, you will typically end up, if
Okay.
you book your apartment at, let's say, X amount, let's say 8,000 rupees per square feet,
Hmm.
for example, you may have to pay some
Hmm.
800,000, 2,500, whatever is the shortfall, to possibly ensure
Hmm.
that you get your completed apartment. I'm just breaking it down in very
Hmm.
simple words. Or you may get your entire refund, or some
Hmm.
solution is at least as a
Okay.
hope of some solution
Hmm.
compared to
So,
the.
are there any so are there any stricter penalties for the builders in this case?
No, there is no specific stricter penalties in the law that has been laid down for the real estate sector.
Mhm.
In fact, there is some discussion going on that there has to be a
Mhm.
specific set of regulations that has to administer the real estate sector, because there is also a grievance from the promoter side that they're also suffering a
Mhm.
lot. A lot of home buyers are kind of coming together and taking the company to insolvency without understanding the implications.
Mhm.
But if you couple the IBC along with one of the other important laws that came in, ma'am, it's called the Real Estate Regulatory Authority, RERA. RERA का आपने
Rera,
would have
yeah.
heard about. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So RERA puts in a lot of compliance obligations on builders, and earlier there was this whole thing of builders would take money for project A and move the money to project B, and then from there to project C, and
Mhm.
then the project A would never get completed and all of that.
Mhm. That
So a
happens
lot of that.
famously with the Amrapali. This happened.
Yeah, I know. That has been happening, and
Uh,
then JP
mm,
Supreme Court has been very, very firm. The tribunals have been very
mm.
firm. So JP Infra is
Okay.
seeing at end of the day 20,000 home buyers impacted. It is seeing some hope at the end of the day. Suraksha ARC, one of
Mhm.
the companies, has taken over. They've acquired the
Mhm.
project, and the idea is to complete the project. And there is not just that the court. I mean, it's called the National Company Law Tribunal. It's not that they have just approved and say, "Ah, ठीक है, you complete it." There is a monitoring committee. There is time to time, I would say, compliances reports need to be filed, progress reports as to are these projects being completed, when are they being completed.
mm,
So a 3 year timeline,
mm,
if I'm not wrong, in the JP case has been sought for.
mhm,
But yes, RERA and
okay.
IBC read together has provided a reasonable amount of protection to the home buyer. In the absence of these two laws, I think the only option was either a civil suit or going to the consumer forum,
Mm,
and they were not being
mm,
very effective at that point in time. So
mm,
definitely,
mm.
there is some, I would say, there's a lot more onus on the builders.
Okay. So apart from this JP that you are citing as that there has been a little success and government has been strict, can you cite some other inferences where this IBC code has worked very well and the solution has been arrived at to the satisfaction of all the stakeholders involved? Some
Now, see,
exemplary
all the
cases?
stakeholders. Yeah, so I will give you a couple of examples, but all the stakeholders is always a challenge because IBC is a law where there is a certain waterfall mechanism that is applicable, wherein it is initially there are some insolvency costs and all of that, and then the secured creditors are supposed to get paid first. The secured, which is pretty much the
Okay.
bankers, financial creditors, the financial
Okay.
institutions, and workmen dues for 24 months and all that. So it's all stakeholders being satisfied. It's that happens in a one-off scenario. I mean, it's very. I think Binani Cements was one of those cases where for about a
Okay.
7,200 crore due total debt, the entire amount was given by Ultratech and it was taken over. But then two good cases where you could say that though there was a lot of litigation, it was tough to run those processes. SR Steel was a good case where about
Okay.
50,000 crores dues were there, and it was still acquired by the ArcelorMittal and the Nippon Group put together. They came up as a consortium and they acquired it for a reasonable sum, about somewhere about 35,000 crores or somewhere on those lines, with a haircut of about 15%, which is still okay. And then the other being Bhushan Steel and Power. So Bhushan Steel was
Okay.
also acquired by the Tata Group, which was also
Okay.
acquired at a reasonable, I would say, valuation or a reasonable price, wherein the haircut was not so bad to the lenders. So of course, then there are other cases such as, for example, Jet Airways. The process has been resolved, but
Mhm.
Jet Airways again, for some reason, the airline has not kicked off yet. It is still running
Okay.
some issues. Ruchi Soya is another example which was acquired by the Patanjali Group. But of course, Ruchi Soya would be a case, for example, where there is a haircut. There's about a 50 60
Mhm.
percent loss to the bankers on the face of it.
Mhm.
So there are companies. Videocon Group underwent a huge
Mhm.
insolvency process where about 13 14 companies
Mhm.
were put together, and they were
Mhm.
ran into a common process was run. And so there are some companies which have actually tasted success. Some companies have not. They have landed up in liquidation. But yeah, at
Mhm.
least one, what the way I'm seeing it is that one way or the other you're having a result. It's not going,
Mhm.
as they say, the common phrase in Indian, uh,
Mhm.
that in courts there are just date pay dates and adjournments over
Mhm.
adjournments. So thankfully there
Mhm.
are at least some results that we can see in these cases.
Okay. So is liquidation, like you said, that some companies did go into liquidation. So what is the percentage of those companies that went into liquidation and versus the those cases which were up and running after this thing, the resolution was made?
So I'll give you some broad level numbers now. I'm not conscious
Mhm.
because I have all the specific data, but I think it's enough to
Mhm.
have a broader
No, broadly, yeah,
sense.
yeah, broadly.
For
Mhm.
about 7,300 companies against which the insolvency process was initiated in the last, let's say, 6 7 years. This is as on whatever data I'm telling you is as on 31st of December 2023, the latest data that's available
Okay.
from the government.
Mhm.
About 891 companies were resolved through a resolution plan one way or the other, and about
Mhm.
2,200 plus companies were put into the liquidation mechanism.
Okay.
So a ratio of almost 1 is to 3.5 for one company which goes into resolution, about three plus companies go into liquidation. But earlier
Okay.
that was 1 is to almost 1 is to 5. So it's
Mhm.
slowly getting better. That's number one.
Okay.
Number
Okay.
two, the other impact of this law is about out of these 7,300 cases, what seems to be missed out a lot of times is about 2,000 cases have been closed, appeal, review, settlement, one way or the other, and that's a huge positive step. I would say that's a huge.
Yeah.
Between the lines, you can read that now the promoter is concerned that he would like to settle, get out of the mess. Otherwise, uh,
Mhm.
the company
Mhm.
may go off. they're out of their hands. So
Hmm.
that's something which is also
Hmm.
showing some amount of success. So yeah, so
Hmm.
this is a few, if it's, this is what you were asking. And liquidation also, which I've been trying to
Hmm.
always say, see, liquidation is not a very negative term. It sounds very, bankruptcy, liquidation. So I sometimes
It
believe,
does.
this law, the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, first of all, should be, I think, at some point the government should consider renaming it as the restructuring of companies, or restructuring in corporate insolvency code, or something like that. So at least there is a
Okay.
positive connotation to it.
Hmm.
In liquidation also, there are provisions
Hmm.
today where you can come up with some kind of revival plans. It's called schemes. You can come up
Okay.
with mechanisms where the liquidator, the court officer, sells the particular unit of the company or the entire company as a going concern as in various basis. So it is not just that it comes down to the last thing. Of course, the last option is just sell whatever assets are there. But sometimes, as they
Hmm.
say, you need to bite the bullet. You need to take some tough
Hmm.
decisions, and so that at least in
Hmm.
future we don't have a
Hmm.
similar situation going 10 years down.
Yeah. Yeah. So apart from IBC, are there other laws that have been restructured? How is the whole system being renovated? How is the whole system being evolved?
So, ma'am, yes, there have been actually quite a few other laws which have also come into. And IBC has obviously caught attention and taken the limelight because of its, I would
Mm.
say, very interesting results. Almost 3 lakh plus crores has been recovered through a resolution of these companies. And one
Okay.
figure which goes against unnoticed is almost 10 lakh crores, 9.7 lakh crores has been, resolved between parties when the cases were filed,
Okay.
about 27,000 cases, almost 10 lakh crores, before the company even goes into the insolvency process, which means once again shows that the promoter is now serious. They would like to settle.
Mm.
So 13 and a half lakh crores coming back into the system, both to the, I would say, trade creditors in terms of pre-insolvency cases, or to the financial creditors, put together is at least a positive multiplier effect. So that's what I would
Mm.
like to close the insolvency code issue. Now,
Mm.
with respect to the other laws, definitely quite a few other
Mm.
laws have been, brought into place. For example, the Mediation Act was brought in last year, where the idea is to
Mm.
promote mediation as much as possible, make it, give it a legislative, give it a legal standing. For that's one of the laws which I find good. Commercial Courts Act was a law which was brought into 2015 by this government, wherein
Mm.
all the commercial disputes would be decided by a specific set of benches or courts, so they don't get mixed up with your normal civil cases. So these are all, measures to go for the ease of doing business, and commercial courts are supposed to work within a more stricter time frame. So that is the commercial court side. The third, I would say, is introduction of timelines in the Arbitration Act, the Arbitration and Conciliation Act, which is one of the laws of 1996, which is a very, I would say, important law for the country. They brought in an angle of timeline where the the arbitration process has to get over within 12 months, extendable by 6 months, with the permission of, I think, whether if both the parties agree, and if it's beyond that, they need to go to the courts. They also brought in certain schedules where the, arbitrators fee structure was all more made more viable financially, I would say, and also more impartiality issues, how, who should be an arbitrator, who is disqualified to be an arbitrator. Those were made more stricter and all of this. This goes on to say that there have been progressive laws.
Mm.
Also, there have been interesting laws where over and above, if I'm not wrong, about 30 odd labor laws have been put together in 4 labor codes, just 4 broad labor codes, and that's also been an important step in the, I would say, putting laws together, wherein you don't have multiple laws. See, the number keeps varying. Some people say 20,000 compliances have been done away with. Some say 30,000 compliances have been done away with. So there's no specific list of number of compliances, but definitely quite a few thousands of compliances have been done away. Also, a fair bit of laws. Like, for example, there was the Jan Vishwas Act, if I'm not wrong.
Mm.
That was one
Mm.
of the laws where about 44 laws across 29 ministries or so. There were a
Mm.
lot of sections were decriminalized. Now, for small things, if there is imprisonment also as a punishment, that just kind
Mhm.
of makes it a little bit more harassing for the business, for the entrepreneur to do the business. So these have been steps that the government has been taking, I would say, in the last 8 years.
So that is the reason the opposition has been hinting at government is pro business and it is in the hands of businessmen, Adani and Ambani. Is the
Ma'am, see
government
that
that
I
pro businessmen?
okay, so I'll give you an answer to this. I'll give you a very, I would say, realistic answer to this. The government is both, I mean, I'm saying this as a neutral party. The government is both, I would say, pro business. They're giving a good
Okay.
level playing field, a good ecosystem for people to come into business, and I don't see anything wrong with that. See, unless your economy is going to be strong, you're going to be resilient, you will have a good business ecosystem in place, you will have good supporting laws, your policies will not keep changing every now and then. I mean, it had gone down to a point, if I'm not wrong, in the previous regime, which is now the opposition. I would not name the industrialist, but one of the very prominent industrialists in India had gone to the extent of saying was putting an industry in this country is so difficult. I'd rather go to Brazil or I'd go to Indonesia and put in my factories. I don't want to, invest anymore and work in our country. Um, there were a lot of lamenting, I would say, statements made by a lot of industrialists and businesses. At the
Mhm.
same time, what I think the same very opposition tends to miss out is that while on one
Mhm.
side they are definitely facilitating business, which is definitely very
Mhm.
good, because it was in the previous regime where there were a lot of issues. That's when actually this whole genesis of your non-performing assets, banks, indiscriminate
Mhm.
lending, um, financial, if I would say, somebody had used the word financial murder of the economy, but yeah,
Mhm.
a mess of the
Mhm.
economy was made. No proper planning, lot of issues, ma'am. Compromise on every possible aspect. Multiple scams leading to investor sentiment going wrong. I'll give you two examples.
Mhm.
The coal blocks which were allocated, which was a scam.
Mhm.
Forget the amount, 1.8 lakh crores, 2 lakh crores, that's one aspect. Ultimately,
Mhm.
Supreme Court cancelled all of that. Same thing happened
Mhm.
with your 2G spectrum thing, the whatever, telecom sector. So what happens is
Mhm.
when Supreme Court cancels all these licenses, just imagine
Mhm.
the impact on that particular sector. Investor
Yeah.
confidence is eroded. People are,
Mhm.
nobody wants to do business with the country. India was in a
Mhm.
situation where India was in a fragile five economy in 2014, if I'm not wrong. It had reached a stage where
Mhm.
it had only, I think, 6 months worth of forex to manage its imports. Which
Okay.
when 2004, when the Vajpayee era was over, it was almost about 16 to
Mhm.
17 months of forex that India had to manage its
Okay.
imports, and now it's come back to about
Mhm.
11 months. So one side is
Okay.
the business part, and I can definitely speak more about it. But also, the same government has also ensured that a lot of direct beneficiary transfers, direct beneficiary schemes, the Jan Dhan
Mhm.
program, which has become very popular, that has gone through.
Mhm.
50 crore accounts have been opened. See, the pilferage and leakage of the middlemen, which would at some point in time
Mhm.
almost constitute 35 to 40% of the actual amount which was released
Mhm.
at the government level, that is saved.
Mhm.
So there is also parallelly a
Mhm.
lot of work happening both on, I mean, while on one side to ensure there is business facilitation, which I don't think is anything wrong, and second is
Mhm.
also at the very grassroots level, as they say, the last mile and all of that. So like, I was just going through some of these, articles, some of these laws, right, some of these policies, where they have the
Mhm.
Pradhan Mantri, I think, there are a couple of insurance related policies at a very, very nominal
Yeah.
subsidized price of some 400 rupees
Mhm.
per annum, which is a term insurance of 2
Mhm.
lakhs. Then there is something which is again some 20 rupees per annum, where you get a accidental cover and things of that nature. But what is it? It's your Indian version of moving towards the social security system slowly. You have the pension
Mhm.
schemes. So these are all getting
Mhm.
rolled out. You have data available. People are kind of getting benefited, and possibly why I will not even get into what the opposition is speaking or not speaking on things of that nature. I mean, at this point
Mhm.
in time, I think that's
Mhm.
not very significant. Is what my personal view is. Even if you see internationally, you take,
Mhm.
while again I don't believe, I'm someone who believes that it's high time that India doesn't have to depend on the, I would say, certification of the Western world, whether
Yeah.
it is a
True.
JP Morgan, Yeah, whether it's a
True.
JP Morgan or whether it's any of these standard reports which come by, and then
Mm,
Credit Suisse, and we get very
mm,
happy. IMF, we get very happy. We need to move
mm,
beyond that. If you're talking about
mm,
2047, where we want to lead the way, I mean, we don't need a
mm,
certification from them. But since that has been the past, that has been the trend, you can look out their own reports which clearly show that what was India in 2004, then in 14, and then in 2024, there has been a significant impact both on this side as well as on the side of, when you say non-business, which is basically your people at the poverty level, people at the
yeah.
farmers, and so on and so forth. So
Mm,
there is a specific data which also says that almost 24 crore people have been brought out of
mhm,
multi-dimensional, poverty, which is poverty from all
mhm,
aspects. Everyone's aware
mm,
about the various the toilet schemes, the various benefit schemes, Ujjwala schemes, so on and so
mhm,
forth. Those are not my core areas, but people are aware.
mhm,
So it would be wrong to say that it is only a business friendly government. In fact, it should
mhm,
be a business friendly government. Otherwise, you are dependent on, I would say, external forces, external commercial borrowings, and people from the Western world who will then at some point
mm,
in time just pull the strings. And uh, I don't think that's a good idea, man. We don't want to get back to that
mm.
situation. We were there.
Yeah,
With great
yeah.
difficulty, we've
Yeah.
come a way ahead.
Mm. Now we want to move ahead.
We want to move ahead, and we want to move on our terms, not on the terms
Mm.
set by somebody else. And the
Yeah, yeah.
government has to set that up.
Mm. So you were talking about the timelines that have been fixed for various things as for the businesses are concerned, the court cases are concerned. So, and you also talked about the labor laws that have been simplified and all. This just a small question aside of this is have the timelines been fixed for labor disputes also? Is the
Specific
government?
timelines and amendments. I mean, I'm
Mm,
not a specialist on that, so that's something which I may not be in a
mm,
position to comment on. But definitely, there has been simplification. There have been lesser laws, but this is
mm,
something which possibly is not an area which I can possibly comment on. Whether
mm,
specific
mm.
labor-related disputes have also been brought within a timeline.
Mm. No, since we're talking about the restructuring of laws, so you're talking about only about the commercial laws, not the other
Yes.
kinds.
No, sir. There are so primarily is more of the commercial laws, but even the labor laws, the multiple labor laws
Okay.
which were there, so they have all
Mm.
been put together under four labor codes, and so
Okay.
those are the.
Okay. 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 Now tell us about the non-performing assets and like earlier banks were giving and the bad loans were increasing and increasing and increasing, which led to the Malyas, the creation of Malyas and the Nirav Modis. So tell us about
I think
that.
I'm
What is
always
the
I'm always
situation
asked
on
this
that?
question.
Mhm.
Sure. I'm
Because
always asked this.
that's the burning question, and that was everywhere in the media, and everyone. eh, I would again say opposition was talking like a lot about it. That these people ran away in BJP governments. Let me say that in their tenure they have run away. The government has allowed them to run away. What's the
Okay.
situation?
So let's have a little bit of a holistic picture over here. The
Mm,
gross NPA of our country, ma'am, out of as against the
mm,
gross advances, sometime in
mm,
1993 was about 23%. We were in that bad a shape.
mm,
In
mm,
1998, it became 16%, which is when Mr. Vajpayee ji took over as the prime minister. And by the time her tenure was over, that had improved to 7.8%. Now,
okay.
the impact of that was seen right until 2009, while though because 2000, I believe 1998 to 2004 was again a time where there was a lot of nation building work done. So the impact of
Okay.
that was there until 2008, 2009. Gross NPAs were in the 2 to 3% range or 3 to 4% range, not very bad. But it was only in, if I would say, post the 2009 crisis, or I won't even want to connect it with the crisis. What had happened was a lot of these loans, the genesis of it, which I always speak about, is the indiscriminate lending. When what you used to call what you can come on the lighter side call the phone banking concept, where you just get a call from so and you will have to disburse amounts. Now, neither was
Mm,
there a valuation, nor was a collateral assessed, nor
mm,
were there any. proper mechanisms to check if these loans are being given for the rightful purposes. What is the project? What is the project likely to bring in terms of revenue? What is the forecast? None of that was really gone into it, or maybe to some extent the banks did, but not sufficiently. And that
Mhm.
is where the banks see, no loan goes bad in the second or third year of its lending. Loans go start going bad or start getting negative after some amount of time, 5 years, 4 years, 5 years is what it does. So in 2009-10, when actually the banks started realizing that no, the loans are not some of the monies that we've given, those don't seem to be coming back. Now the banks
Mhm.
didn't want to have a huge, I would say, open NPA in their balance sheet, or a negative asset on their balance sheet, or I don't know to put it this way, a liability on their balance sheet, or on books they will show as receivables and they'll pay tax over it. Why should they do that? And so therefore they started categorizing uh, them as NPAs later. But then there was some, I would say, financial jugglery done in somewhere around 2009 to 2014-15, wherein there was this whole thing of evergreening of loans, where you know that the loan is kind of gone bad, the money is unlikely to come, or only a small portion of it is going to come. But you don't want to see that as a negative loan in your books. When I say in your books, in the books of the banker, as well as also in the books of
Mhm.
the lender, right?
Okay.
Sorry, the borrower, the borrower. So banks would, just to ensure that on 31st March every year the interest is serviced and there is a small interest portion taken care of, they would sanction an additional amount, adjust it towards interest, and ensure that the loan looks as a standard account or doesn't look like as though it's gone red or it's gone bad. So this was something which was rolling it under the carpet for about 4 to 5 years. When the present government came into picture, I think you have a question now.
Yeah. Why did it happen? So, like I am sure the people in the banking sector, like you said, they knew all about it. So why were they holding on to it? Why were they not coming out and open about it that we have accumulated this much of NPAs? Why
One of
were they hiding it?
So there were two broad reasons to it. One, of course, there was, if I can use the word, some kind of a political pressure or something on those lines to not blow it up at that point in time. Otherwise, the economy would have gone into shambles because a few banks would have
Okay.
collapsed and it would have gone into a different thing altogether. The other thing is also, ma'am, what happens is the banking officials, while some of them know that this is going in the wrong direction, see,
Mhm.
let's accept one harsh fact that nobody wants to take the tough step when they are on the seat, because the question and the buck comes and stops at you, and the question is asked to you as to why was this, you know
Allowed.
why did why does this loan go bad, what steps did you take, what measures did you take, so on and so forth. Plus,
Mhm.
also, it was, if I may use the word, some kind of a mutual understanding between the borrowers and lenders. Ki, let this continue. It's okay, because none of them thought that this will you know cycle into or get into something so big that they won't be able to handle it. There's always this positive
Okay.
hope that sometimes a business has, especially when it is going on the distress side, that you will find an investor who will come
Mhm.
in and support you. You will find some third
Mhm.
party who will come in as a joint venture partner, bring in the funds, so on and so forth. So, to some extent, I would say it was lack of clear, transparent, accountable policies on behalf of the banks to the RBI, to the government, which a lot of it has been brought in now in the last few years.
Mhm.
Certain norms have been
Okay.
brought in. I'm not a banking specialist, but certain things called the Basel norms and so on and so forth have been brought in, which clearly show that
Mhm.
the banks have to report a lot more stringently. But at that point in time, there was some free leeway given. So to answer your question, very specific point blank question as to why did they not open up and announce that yes, these
Mhm.
loans have gone bad, it would have impacted, dented the economy, the image of the banks. It would have exposed these companies to be companies which have gone bad, for which the banks would have had to go behind these companies to take whatever recovery action that they had to take. And they didn't have the political mandate, or they didn't have the, I would say, strength to do that. You may call it financial
Mhm.
strength, the sanctions, the permissions, they were somewhere missing. So that was one reason why this was constantly getting rolled over for quite some time. Like I have a list of some willful defaulters in which loans were
Mhm.
granted to some companies, Even after they were
Mm,
declared insolvent, ABG Shipyard was one of those companies. Videocon
mhm,
Industries. These are companies
mhm.
which there have been. It's in public. Whatever I'm telling you is on public. Information is available in public
Mhm,
platforms
mhm,
as to these companies were already defaulting and they still were given some additional rules. There are quite a few. The list is a huge one, but yeah,
mhm.
this is what was happening.
So that means nobody was thinking about the country as such, the country going bad or getting poor by these measures, and everyone was saving their own skin.
I'll ask, yes, ma'am. I'll ask you a reverse question. Have you seen the scam this thing the tele
92.
series the scam I think
Harshad
so.
Mehta's. Harshad
Arshad
Mehta's.
Mehta, yeah, the scam, the
Yeah,
series
yeah.
that the, whatever you call it,
Mm-hmm.
the
Yeah.
recent last year, it was very interesting. So
Mm-hmm.
what did they show in that? What they basically showed was he was putting together some bank receipts, which was being
Mm-hmm.
used as a document to generate more funds from one bank to the other bank, ABC, think of
Yeah.
that. What was Nirav Modi's scam? Nirav Modi was pretty much the same
Mm-hmm.
thing. It was a letter of
Mm-hmm.
undertaking which was given by Bank A to Bank B, and Bank A will give a letter of undertaking only if it has a collateral from Nirav Modi or from any of those
Mm-hmm.
companies. There was no collateral;
Mm-hmm.
things were
There was
not
no
pledged.
collateral.
So they
Mm-hmm.
just went on creating those letter of undertakings, rotating it, company A's LOU given to Bank B giving it to Bank C, money getting, they're taking money from all these banks. So if sometimes the question is asked at 12,000 crores PNB and this and that banks, all various banks, I mean, happened, what, I mean, why did it happen? Where the money was given on what? The hard hitting answer is money was given out of thin air. There was nothing to back it. See, today
There's
when you and me go to take a
mm,
loan for a house or a car,
mm.
they mortgage
Yes,
our
such a
car, they
huge
mortgage our
process.
respect.
I know. Mm,
A car loan I took some 60 pages or 50 pages. I signed my number of pages in terms of whatever
mm,
signatures. At the end of it, I told the banker, "You want to write my skin also, write it off in this box for 10 lakhs. If that is what you have, that's what you think of a normal Indian citizen." So he started laughing as well. But I will also tell you the other part now. You also mentioned about this thing. People keep saying the को भागने दे दिया, Nirav Modi and Malia, two names that keep coming in, and also the example of today, actually, there are recoveries that have been happening. As per one of the statements given by the Minister of State for Finance, this was about a year and a half back, against about
mm,
22,000 crores or 23,000 crores of the total debt that had accrued to these two or three, Nirav Modi, Mehul Choksi, and Vijay Mallya, these three
mhm,
groups.
mhm,
A reasonable part of it, I would say about 14, 15,000 crores, have been one way or the other, their personal assets have been confiscated, their inventories have been confiscated, some money is coming back to the banks. Now, how much of these numbers are true, untrue, that we don't know. We're not very sure because we, end of the day, rely upon a statement made. And when a statement is made in an official platform, of course, we take it that this is the right statement. But I
Yeah.
know for a fact, on a first-hand basis, that, and since I'm advising the I would say relevant stakeholders who need to get those monies now in a lot of these
Mhm,
Modi companies. Uh, there is actually work happening at the ground level. There are these
mhm,
companies which have been put into the insolvency IBC process.
mhm,
Recoveries are being made. It may be small, but whatever inventories are there, whatever was attached by the enforcement directorate, slowly one by one
mhm,
the inventories are getting released. The inventories basically whatever gems, jewels, and all of that. It's all getting attached. Their personal assets are getting attached. See, we may not be able to recover the 100%. 100%, though we are not able to
mhm,
recover even in the Indian companies with the promoter sitting inside the country. So it doesn't
mhm,
justify the fact that they've gone away. I mean, I am absolutely for it that at some point in time, the sooner the better, they should be brought back to the country, and the punishment should be
mhm,
so harsh that going forward, no business person, no banker, no professional facilitating this should even think of trying to do something like this. Because only if you
mhm,
set such harsh punishments is when you will
mhm,
send the message across. Otherwise, it's just going to be हाँ ठीक है trial चल रहा है 10 साल 15 साल. It doesn't work. So
mhm,
definitely yes, they should be allowed. They should be brought in that. But one, recoveries are happening, and two,
mhm,
a very unfortunate, ma'am. Just imagine. Today I am asking you, let's say I am on the opposite side, I am asking you, oh, so many haircuts are happening, you are writing away, writing off loans, industrialists की सरकार है, आप you're writing away the loans given to industrialists, banks are suffering, but they are the same people who sanction these loans, they are the same people who pressurize the banks to give these loans. These loans were given
Yeah.
under, I would say, a lot of reluctance. That is not being questioned because that has become an old, and people have kind of a bit of a short memory. So that's
Short
something which I
memory.
want
Yeah.
people to understand it. Please go do your fact finding. Don't even go by my word. Go do
Mm,
your own basic fact finding. Today, internet has a lot of decent, credible data. See when
mhm,
loans were given. See what happened. And it is like this: the facilitator of the wrongdoer is not being questioned, but the person who's
mm.
correcting things, sorting
Trying to.
things right, you are questioning. You are
Yeah.
questioning that person.
Huh.
That's unfair.
Yeah, it's unfair. So, see, from a very fragile economy in 2014 when this government took over to today when we are in the top five, and the Prime Minister says that we'll be in top three by the end of 2029. Uh, would I want your views?
Uh, Definitely, ma'am. I believe, and I'm not saying this because of merely uh, going by what the schemes say or what they're trying to do, but the data speaks for itself. I'm somebody who believes in data, and the data speaks for itself. I feel they have done a significant task in the last, phenomenal task in the last 10 years. 10 years, they have brought us back to possibly, I would say, the previous regime took us back about 20, 30 years. God knows where we were. We were lost. We were neither here nor there. Rather, we were in a pretty fragile situation. If you see 2014, the government comes in. 2015, IMF comes up with a report which starts saying that the near-term growth of this particular government and the country is seeming to be positive. There are things getting better. Policy decisions are started to be taken. Initiatives are starting to be. By 2017, IMF says that the medium-term prospects of India are better based on XYZ parameters. Now, looking at in terms of what work they have done, because we are today the fifth largest economy, we are looking at becoming the third largest in 2 to 3 years, and we are looking at 2047 being a developed economy, which to me, by and large, means ensure that there is no aspect of poverty, minimize poverty, ensure that you also increase per capita GDP. Khali dekhiye, there's no point we saying that we are the third largest economy or fifth largest economy. And if your poverty levels and your income distribution thing is so unequal. So we need to ensure that aspect is also being taken care of. But the amount of work that we all know has been done on the infrastructure side. For example, the number of highways constructed, kilometers. I was, I was reading somewhere that about 16,000 kilometers of highway was constructed in the 10 years of the previous regime. And in this regime, it's almost 45,000 kilometers of highway. Same thing, but it's way double triple. The number of airports have increased from 75, 76 airports to almost 149 airports in the last 10 years. Multiple parameters, ma'am. I would say the electric rail routes from about 22,000 kilometers, which was there as on 2020 or 2014. In 2024, this comes to it touches about 50,000 kilometers. So there's a lot of infrastructure development. Defense, we are not relying in MO. We've understood that, and the COVID, and exactly around the COVID time, if you see, there were also our neighbors, our dear neighbors, giving us enough trouble. So we also understand that we can't, be very, I would say,
Depending
complacent
upon
about
them.
it. We can't. We can't. In fact, I was happy to see the news in the last couple of years, 1 year. If you see, India is very keen. India is going all out to get its own semiconductor plants, ensuring that we are
Yeah.
putting together an ecosystem where semiconductor plants can be made into India. Because there was this, yeah, now I don't know how much truth is there, but there was this whole theory which was propounded saying that the semiconductors that are made in China, they have a bug, they have something else which could compromise the Indian, defense security. We don't know. There
It
was this
can
a theory
be.
like this
It
on
can
Twitter.
be. It can be. China is
It
not to be
can be. So
trusted.
we all know that. We know what we've seen. So that was there. I mean, we know for a fact that even the US had a similar feeling at some point in time. But today we are getting equipment for thermal imaging. We are getting our own equipment. We are spending on defense. We are spending on, I would say, a lot of uh, what do you call it? I would not call it religious tourism, but spirituality
mm,
tourism and things around that.
mm,
A lot of inflow is into the country. Uh,
mm,
there are funds, ma'am. Goldman Sachs, for example, has come up with a specific India index fund, so that there are a lot of investors across the world who want to invest in India in equity, which shows the confidence that
okay.
they have in the Indian economy. And this is not, mind you, most importantly, ma'am, this is not external commercial borrowing. See, borrowing is something which is a loan, which you have to give. आज
Mm,
नहीं तो कल आपको वापस देना पड़ेगा, which was growing at some 21% CAGR, but 20 at almost
mm,
20% per year. The previous regime was increasingly taking loans. Here,
mm,
today there's a reverse situation where foreigners don't want to miss out on the India success story, and they want to ensure
mm,
that they also are a part of it and they invest and make some equity gains out of it. So
mm,
even if for some reason that particular company collapses or something goes off, it's not an additional debt burden on the country. It's an
mm,
equity which is
mm,
coming. So there are a lot
mm,
of such things which have been happening. Inflation has been at somewhere about 5 to 6%, which has been more manageable. Forex reserves have been better. I've already touched upon it. So
mm,
that's there. See the production, for example, of solar energy per unit from about 23 cents, it has come down to about 3 cents. This was disclosed in the Davos recent the World Economic Summit or the forum in Davos. And one thing which caught my attention very much is, for example, we're talking about the eco blended fuel. We
okay.
were looking at, I think, mixing 1.2% or 1.5%. I think today we are already
Mm,
mixing 12% in quite a few places, and it is getting so. So the larger picture, if one sees and doesn't see this only in silos or in specific compartments, when you see all
mm,
this together, one does have a definite sense of, I would say, confidence and a sense of assurance that we are at a reasonably strong position today. See, today,
mm,
example, the Russia Ukraine war, everybody was watching what does
mm,
India do in the UN, whether it votes against or
mm,
for or it abstains, and what does it
mm,
do. It managed to do the
mm,
right thing, or whatever, it managed to do
mm,
something where it still had the support of
mm,
Russia. Ukraine didn't
mm,
go against it, and we did. So
mm,
today it matters what India does. We were nowhere in this position.
mm,
So to answer your
mm,
question is, will where do you see India, in 2028, 29, and then going forward beyond that?
mm,
I am optimistic. I am positive. I am hopeful that we have stable regime. The one that's there already continues for more time, because the first 5 years they were figuring out what the mess is. They started putting things in place. Last five
yeah.
years, as I see purely from an economic and monetary perspective, economic, monetary, legal
Mm,
perspective, they have started rolling out things. They have started clearing up a lot of mess. They have started setting the foundation blocks. You need to
mm,
give a good regime another solid 5-10 years for them to ensure that these you know whatever efforts that they're making today, that comes into some kind of tangible
mm,
results which we can again quantify based on data to see where we stood in
mm,
2024 and where we stand in 2029 or 2020, whatever, 2030, or whatever as the case may be. So I'm
mm,
positive about it, and I'm positive about
mm,
it because of the, I would say, what the data speaks and what is
mm,
in terms of what this is. They at least have a vision document. They are working
mm,
towards a progressive way forward. They're also,
mm,
I would say, there's a huge renaissance happening with respect to the Indian uh, Indic perspective, Indic ethos. That's also a huge
yeah.
thing that's happening. So it's a
Yeah.
multi-dimensional approach. So I would say
Mm,
that all that put together, I think we should be looking
mm,
forward to a positive, uh, at
mm.
least set of 5 to 10 years ahead,
Rising
and
India,
hopefully even more than that.
or maybe
Sorry.
rising or risen India, a rising and a risen India.
Yeah, so very interestingly, the
Mm.
one thing which I didn't understand, I've never been able to understand, is that in 2004, Vajpayee's
Mm.
government's slogan was India Rising, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah,
So that was the
yeah,
2004 slogan. But still, and the economy was in
India
a good shape.
shining.
But
It was
India
India
shining.
shining.
In,
India shining. Mm.
Sorry, India shining. Yeah,
Mm.
India shining. Just you
Yeah.
mentioned India rising, like India shining.
Huh.
So India was
Yeah.
actually reasonably doing well. The data shows that. But for
Mm.
some reason, I
Mm.
think in our countries, at that point in time, maybe the maturity wasn't there to connect
Mm.
economic success with political success. But I think the
Mm.
people today understand social media has brought in a lot of change, and we
Mm.
should be looking towards
Also,
much rising. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Also because, pardon me for being partial towards Mr. Modi, Mr. Narendra Modi. He's a strong leader. Vajpayee ji was a little like that. He wanted everyone to come together on one platform. Mr. Narendra Modi doesn't believe in that. He says, "You don't believe me? To hell with you. I will do what is good for the country." Vajpayee ji was always wanted everyone to come together on one table, which was not possible. I think that was the one reason why he couldn't picture it out like the present
Point very
PM
well
can.
taken. I mean, I agree to a large extent. See, there were also political compulsions. It was not a full-fledged
Mm.
BJP government. It was an NDA
Yeah.
government with a lot
Mm,
of coalition
mm,
partners. And
mm,
they had come after that. If you remember that, it was a very funny time. 13-day government, then 13-month government.
mm.
So they wanted to at least
Yeah.
ensure that this time let's complete one tenure. Last day
True.
one person
True.
backs out and there is a cross voting and all that happened. But yes, I agree. Today we have a much stronger
Mm,
leader, and he believes in what his thought process is. He implements it.
mm.
He ensures it is implemented down to the T, and
Yeah.
he watches the results. And if you see, the
Mm,
departments have all started maintaining data a lot better. So I
mm,
totally agree
mm.
with you that
Yeah.
this is. I mean, we've been lucky, ma'am. I think our generation, or we are, I would say, we've been lucky in the last
Mm,
10 years to have a leader like him who's
mm,
brought us from a position where when you go into a foreign land, you would look possibly down, or you would just about walk through. Today, you go to
mm,
any foreign land, right, from US up to New
mm,
Zealand, you will walk
mm.
as a relatively prouder person, as a prouder Indian. At least I feel so. Uh,
That's a
whenever
big
I travel.
achievement.
So yeah.
That's a big achievement. Yeah. Yeah.
So
So, one last, no, second last question. What about, like you said, that there are many, like tariq pe tariq kind of a thing, that there are pendency of cases in courts. So, is there a solution in sight to that?
okay, so that's a completely different track. But yes, I will. No, no, definitely, ma'am. I think as a lawyer, I would be surprised if you would not question, ma'am. How about this tariq pe tariq? See, there are things
Mm.
wherein we are running with a backlog of 5 crore cases, ma'am. We cannot shy away from
How
that. Our
much?
challenge is totally 5 crore cases in the country. 5 crore. Uh,
Huge.
of course, the larger chunk, 4 crore plus, and that is the district courts and lower courts. Then you have a few lakhs in the high court, and then I think 40,000, 50,000 in the Supreme Court. Approximate numbers. Now, either we go the conventional way, where we just keep
Mm,
cribbing about it and do nothing. But I think the government is making efforts. There was something called the Judicial Infrastructure Report that came out about 3 4 months back. A lot of suggestions have been
mm,
made, wherein there have been, of course, that was more to improve the infrastructure, but also, like for example, the recruitment of judges in a different mechanism. I mean, there's a whole debate, and I don't think we will have the time for a debate today to discuss this issue. But there's
mhm,
always you would have heard this collegium system
mm.
versus the NJASC, and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah, so things like these. I think my simple answer to that would be 3 or 4 points. One,
Mm,
bring in a system like your civil services, All India Civil Services equivalent for All India Judicial Services. Ensure people are
mm,
recruited on merit, train them well, and put them in respective courts so that they can come up the ladder based on merit.
mm,
Meritocracy is very important. Number two,
mm,
for the pending cases, there is already a lot of, see, wherever government is a litigant, there are some policies
mm.
where Vivad se Vishwas and things like that. A little bit of more push is required towards that. More push towards
Okay.
mediation, which the government has started doing. Uh,
Mm,
Definitely, we need a huge, I would say, additional set of judges, support staff to be uh, recruited on an yesterday basis. And that's something which the government, I think, should be one of its top priorities, because you have all this economic development, you have everything, but if the man in the country is not able to get justice, the common man, the
mm.
man in the last mile
Yeah.
is not able to get justice, I don't think it's fair.
Mm,
So
mm,
something has to be done there. The good things that have happened, of course, maybe it was an aftermath of COVID. Online hearings have started, virtual hearings have started, which has
mm,
started saving cost for the litigant. They don't have to travel
mm,
all the way down to the concerned court and so on and so forth. But again,
mm,
problem is, for that you need good technology infrastructure and things like
mm,
that. Also, we have to come to a system where, in some cases, maybe let the parties only file the if I may use the word, written arguments, not get into detailed arguments which goes on for very long. So things like that. Of course, that cannot be a one size fits all. So cases will have to be
mm,
categorized in different types. Whichever cases are
mm,
not worth extending, uh, try to mediate, push for which the government is doing. Come up with time-bound mediations. See, you cannot stop from
mm,
people from going to court. In fact,
mm,
one way that I see it is, if you have so many cases pending in the courts, yes, that's a problem because our ratio for judges to the number of population is less. But it also shows the
mm.
faith of the common man in the judiciary.
In the
That person
judiciary,
thinks,
yeah.
if nowhere else, somewhere at least in the judiciary is where I will ultimately get my, due. I will get my
Mm,
justice eventually.
justice. Mm,
So that's the other way of looking at it. So
mm,
efficiency has to be brought in there. I in fact have some out of box personal thoughts which is happy to share
mm,
with you. But for example, you have
mm,
High Court judges retiring at 62, Supreme Court judges retiring
mm,
at 65. They are at the peak of their intelligence, their best, their experience. Why are you letting them go? If
mm,
they have specially that you said, I mean, let there be independent, let there, for example, a committee which can have a set of
mm,
independent objective parameters, and if some
mm,
judges are meeting, or the whichever judge is meeting those parameters, they can be given an extension or retained for another 3 to 5 years, and they can be
mm,
given specific tasks. Kindly go to that region, that court, that high court, administratively monitor it, as well as ensure that you do
mm,
this is what we are expecting out of you, because the
mm,
experience they have by then, I mean, we're kind of
mm,
wasting that amazing
mm,
experience that especially a high court judge at 62 has. It's a very young age now. In
mm.
the corporate world, 62 is, where you actually start putting your things together, and it's not you
Yeah.
need a good solid another 7 8 years to work. So
I
that
hope the
would be one
government
thing.
listens to this. I hope the government listens to this point.
That's one thing which, yeah, so I also hope that some point. Also, there are actually now, and this is now that
Hmm,
I've been interacting with people. I
hmm,
always had this feeling that why should a very successful professional leave their profession and go and be let's say a judge for some, for let's say in the judiciary. But
hmm,
interestingly, I came across people who have done
hmm.
enough well. They've done well for themselves. They're doing well in life. They don't mind taking up a 2 3 year cause for the nation kind of a
Tradition.
thing.
Hmm,
2 years, three
hmm,
years, a
hmm,
specific time slot where they are given again an assigned task that commercial
hmm,
cases in this particular region of the country are going very slow. Kindly take this up, prioritize it, streamline it, ensure good
hmm,
orders are coming by. So what happens is you setting up a precedent. So like how though it was
hmm.
a controversial thing, if you remember in the army they came up with one the scheme. I'm not getting the name of the scheme, Agniveer scheme or something like that, where they
Agniveer,
recruited,
Agniveer. Yeah,
they,
hmm, it's a
yeah,
good
they
scheme.
recruited. If I think, hmm,
The 17 plus the school class 12 pass outs in the Agniveer scheme.
yeah. So they were there. If I'm not wrong, they are not permanent recruits, but they are recruited for a certain
No,
tenure
no.
into the.
So maybe 5 years, I think, and after that they'll get some benefits also out of it. They'll be taught also during that way. They'll like accumulate certain certificates and degrees also. That's a good scheme.
So like that you've done for youngsters, possibly
Hmm.
have people who come with specific, I would say, domain expertise,
Hmm.
recruit them as judges in those areas,
Hmm.
those sections, ensure that they do work then, and have an undertaking from them that they would never then go and appear in those courts ever, either as lawyers or as
Hmm.
any other professionals or whatever it is.
Hmm.
So things of that nature we will have to do. We will have to
Hmm.
have, I would say, more of technology coming into play. So I think these are the immediate ones I can think of. At least
Hmm.
use the best of what you already have, and then recruit more. I think it has to be at least a bare minimum dual approach.
Hmm. Maybe you can come up with another book on that. The ideas,
I am
the
working on.
okay, okay. Tell me,
No,
which
I
book are
am
you
working
working
on
on?
something which is, no. This is a book
Uh,
on commercial
mm,
litigation,
okay.
but maybe
Mhm.
towards the recommendations and suggestion sections, I think we will elaborate a
Yeah.
bit more on this in terms of how to steadily
Okay.
achieve that.
Okay. Okay. So, do you mind talking about the next book that you are writing, working on?
I am working
When
on
is
that.
it?
I'm working. I'm working on. I'm working on two
Mhm.
projects actually.
Okay.
I can speak about one possibly, but the other one, my
Mhm.
publisher may be a little upset about it. So I am working on something
Mhm.
which is on commercial disputes, simplifying
Mhm.
commercial litigation for again something very similar. How here I have
Mhm.
demystified insolvency code. We'll be looking at
Mhm.
demystifying 6 or 7 crucial commercial laws for the common person as to
Okay.
how it works, what are the pros and cons, how are the
Mhm.
stakeholders impacted, what you should do, what you should not do as a common person, when can you quickly step out or exit out of the litigation, when is it not worth
Okay.
going into the litigation. So we're working on, so that's
Okay.
going to be the broad structure that we'll be looking at. We're working on it. A little difficult to at this point say when it would be ready, but yeah, work is on.
Oh, okay. Okay. So thank you so much, Anand, for talking to us and giving us all the insights that you have given. It was lovely talking to you, and I wish you all the best for all your the future two books that you have in your mind and all the future endeavors. And I hope you write that book about the reforms that I think government should be doing, the judges
Thank
thing
you,
you
ma'am.
talked
Thank you
about.
so much for your
Yeah,
Thank you so much for your
yeah.
good wishes. I will work towards those. We're working towards those, and
Mm,
definitely I will take in your suggestions that we'll try to push this part as well. So at
yeah,
least let the
yeah.
discourse start, let the discussion start amongst people,
Mm,
and then
yeah,
hopefully
yeah,
it takes shape and
mm,
we see some results too. Thank you so much.
yeah. So thank you so much.